Welcome to Phase 2, Research and Sketching. So in this video, I'm going to do kind of a flyover of what we'll be working on this week, in particular the project here. And then we'll also be looking at a few case study examples and talking about what makes a great case study for your final project. And then just any kind of logistics that we have going on throughout the week. So I'm recording this video right here, actually for the second time. The first time I was not recording my audio, so this is take two. Hopefully it will be better than the first time. We'll see. All right, so let's just take a look real quick. We're gonna dive right in and see what our final project or our project is for this week. And so what we're doing this week is focusing on user research, personas, and shaping. So shaping includes things like listing out your core features, listing out the hierarchy of your app screens, and then writing down some user flows. And then at the end, there is a rough sketch that you'll be uploading an image or a document of some sort of your sketch. So we'll talk about this in more detail in a minute, but we're going to take a quick detour here. And I want to show you a couple case studies I came across that I thought would be helpful to look at for reference. So the reason I'm highlighting this case study is because it's a blog post. This is on Medium. I'm sure you've come across Medium articles before. But I've mentioned this a few times. Your final project doesn't have to be delivered on any particular with any particular program or on any particular website. You could build it as your own portfolio site. You could put it on Medium as a blog post. You could put it on Behance or anywhere that's appropriate really for sharing a case study like we're building. And I wanted to show you this one because it's more writing centric. And that is an important part of case studies is it gives the creative director or someone who might be hiring you or evaluating your work an opportunity to kind of look inside your head and see how you think, to get some sense for how clearly you can work in a process, what your process actually is. Everyone's process is a little bit different. There is no like perfect routine for anybody. So it gives us a chance to see kind of behind the scenes what works for you. And in particular, writing is a great way to be able to demonstrate clarity of thought and thinking. So in this one, he's just going through his phases here. And again, these phases will probably be different for you than they are for him, but he's only got 4. And he's going through, okay, well, this is the app that I think is doing a lot of things poorly. It's called Rescue Time. We're going to replace that with a new idea. So he's got some wireframes that he went through, did a mood board to kind of come up with a visual style. I think all these images are from Dribbble. From there, he did his visual style for the home screen, starting there. Always a good place to start. Did a few more screens, and he's writing about each of these kind of separately. He talks about the goals and kind of a recap at the end. So that's a pretty common format, but I wanted to highlight this one just because it's primarily a blog post, and that's a fine way of delivering your final case study if you would like to do it that way. Now, this one I think is very impressive. This is one of the better case studies I've seen of any app, very thorough, very well structured, and this is on the designer's personal website. So this is an app called Views. It provides a layer of trust for where to go and what to experience in each city. And so she's got this more organized here. She has her role on the project, all the different things she contributed to, the client, and the timeline. So this is a real redesign project. And she's outlined the challenge here, which I really like, and the high-level goals. She also documented her process, just like the other guy did, but hers is more visual. I like this too. She put some like actual shape to this. And then she outlines, she goes through each one of these, like discovery, here's the user research I did. I like that she's showing her handwritten notes here. I think showing like hand sketches or handwriting, that can be an interesting kind of glimpse behind the curtain for how you work. So if you do work that way, then taking just kind of rough iPhone pictures of that and putting that in your case study, I would definitely recommend doing that. People like that behind the scenes look. Now this is a persona. We mentioned that we're going to be doing personas this week. People will go nuts with personas. Sometimes they'll create them very detailed, like whole documents or pages of information about someone. Some others, like this one, is more of just like an index card format where she's got the about details. He's 30 years old. He's in San Francisco. He's tech proficient. She even made a picture of him. And again, these are made up people. They're not, they could be based on actual individuals, but Dan Freeman is not a real person, at least this version of him. She's also outlining his core needs, his pain points, and his motivations, which those are all helpful categories to think around. We'll talk about that more once we review our project this week. But this is a good persona. We're not necessarily going to be going into that amount of detail at this point, but once you get to the case study like visualization side, that's a pretty well presented persona here. I like the card format. She goes through defining her features, and she's doing that in a table, kind of brainstorming. Then information architecture. So information architecture is how do the screens fit together and what is on each screen. So she's got her onboarding, explore, search, my places, activity, and account, and then what's under each of these screens. And then she's got her user flow. So this is a pretty complex user flow here. There's a lot of things going on in this app. I would guess that most of your user flows won't be quite this complex, at least not right now. But it is kind of helpful to be able to see this image. So if I look in here, I can see the entry points. So I may have gotten an email notification to download the app, or I may have actually found it in the App Store, or I've already got the app and I just opened it. So those are the entry points. I get to a splash screen, which is kind of like a welcome to the app, or it's loading. Is the user logged in? So this is kind of a decision point. If yes, then let's go to the Explore feed. If no, then, well, does the user have an account? If yes, they log in. If no, they create an account. They go through some onboarding steps, and then they all also end up on this Explore feed screen. So it's really cool. These diagrams will let you kind of see how a user progresses through your app. So we're not going to get this complex with a diagram right now, but we will be outlining at least a basic user flow in our project. I will post a link to these case studies as well, but this one is probably the best example. If you could get close to something like this, it would be amazing. From there, she went to ideation, which is actually her wireframing out these different screens based on the user flows. And then after that, she did a prototype. So she's got an Envision prototype here that you can actually click through based on these wireframes. And the reason she did that is because the next phase is the user testing. So she's trying to validate, am I on the right track here? And so she did some user tests. We've done that before. She mapped their feedback using the sticky note format, and then she made some changes. And she also documented these changes in her case study as well. From there, she did the same thing the other guy did. She did a style guide, a high fidelity prototype, so we can open that prototype as well. And this one's in Figma, not in Envision. So this is very similar to what you'll probably end up doing for your prototype as far as the technology goes, but this is much more high fidelity. It actually looks like a real app here. We've got the final icons, we've got the color scheme, we've got all that stuff. I can tap on some of these things, kind of scroll through. So this is meant to simulate the actual app experience. And I think you get the idea there. And after that, she talks about, well, how would we measure success after this launches? It's important to not just stop once you get to the final prototype. You need to at least have some sort of like, how would we know if this is working? And some sort of recap that kind of outlines what you did. So this is a great example of a fantastic case study, and we should all aim to get to that level of quality if we can. I also wanted to share just some tools that might make this easier for you as you're working through your final project. Notion can be helpful for organizing this stuff. Notion has a bunch of templates. So there's the Notion template gallery here, and they've got some for designers, for product managers. Here's a user research template. Notion can be just a cool way of like grouping all this stuff together. So if you're working on personas and you're working on images and you're trying to build out all the assets you need for your final case study, Notion can be a great way of collecting all of that stuff. There are also persona building tools. Now, I'd be a little careful with these because they're so detailed. Like you can see, look at all the different things you can add to this persona. You've got his personality, his Myers-Briggs here, which is kind of funny, and his skill sets, his frustrations, goals, motivations. These tools can be helpful. You don't necessarily have to get that detailed, but if you'd like to, that is one way to do it. HubSpot has a more marketing-oriented persona tool. It may not always be appropriate for apps, but you can like choose like an avatar for your person and then step through, all these different questions. And at the end, you'll get this like fully built out. Let me see if I can find the end result here. Yeah, you'll get this profile that you can download or export. So that's kind of cool. For flowcharts or user flows, Whimsical, we've used that before. It's a great tool for that. So they've got these little box-based arrow diagrams. You can change the shapes of things. If you did want to get more fancy with your user flows at some point, then Whimsical is a great tool for doing that. For doing the rough wireframes, I would recommend using Excalidraw. We talked about that in the last video, but it's pretty easy. You just have these basic shapes. You can make them look kind of sketchy. It's kind of like a whiteboard. You can collaborate on these as well, but something like this would be fine for this phase as we're just sketching things out. All right, so let's go and take a little bit more of a detailed look at our project for this week. We're starting out just with answering some questions. So this first question is kind of your Google research question. And your mission is to find out who your primary user is, get some actual data about them. So what's their average age, what's their demographic profile? If you can find any info or just even use your own intuition about what their personality traits might be, that would be helpful. Cite your sources if you're pulling these from around the internet. But I think Google is probably your best tool for trying to research this kind of data. Now, it's important to also not lose sight that people are not just numbers and aggregates of data. They're also your friends and your family. And so list at least 3 people you know who would benefit from your app and how it would help them specifically. From there, write out 3 to 5 specific pain points your app solves for the user. So for instance, if you're trying to do an intolerance recipe app, you could say it helps gluten intolerant people find tasty recipes and actually avoid a literal pain point of having a stomach ache from eating gluten. So list out 3 to 5 of those. Then this is your personas. So we're doing written form personas. We don't need to do like a big fancy presentation at this point, although we may be pulling from these personas later once you start working on the visuals for your case study. So do keep that in mind. You'll be writing out 3 different personas. You need to at least give the persona a name, an age demographic, and describe the problem that your app helps them solve. Try to make them varied too. So in most apps, there are different kinds of users you're marketing to, so try to represent each kind in each persona. Now, the next part is taking some of those more abstract writing things we've done and trying to put some more shape around them. So how does this actually work? The first thing we'll do there is list out the core features you need in your app. So search for a recipe filtered by intolerances, create a shopping list from a recipe, favorite bookmark recipes. Those would be examples of core features. Once you've got the core features, now we need to figure out where did those features go? What are the main screens? And so we're just going to use an outline format. This is the information architecture of your app. So on the home screen, the primary features would be search for recipes and featured recipes. On your favorites screen, that would be browse and manage your favorite recipes. It depends on how many screens your app needs, but basically what we're looking for is just the top level screen and then the major feature on each one of those screens. From there, we're going to see, well, how do the users navigate between these features and screens? And this is the user flows. We're going to be using a text-based format of this, not a visual one at this point. So we're just using these little arrows here to indicate the flow. So from home, I might go to a search and then select a recipe from the search results and then add that to my shopping list or favorite it. Or I may take a different flow. I may go from my home to my shopping list to check off an item. So this would be if like I'm in the actual grocery store, how do I check off an item in my list? That would be the user flow for getting there. And from these user flows and this hierarchy, make a rough sketch of each of your top level screens. And again, this is meant to be more of like a fat marker whiteboard style sketch. And it's also meant to be something that you can include later in your case study. So I always like to see case studies that include these rough sketches. So keep that in mind while you're working on this, and then you'll be uploading an image or a document, whatever you choose, to make that here. So that's the project for this week. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to seeing each of you during your group session.